Episode 1, The Outlaws is a British television series produced by the BBC that came out on Amazon Prime this week. The show, set in Bristol, is about 7 people fulfilling their court-mandated community service for an illegal act. Their task is to revamp a community center for the local community, but along the way, each person's personal life is also explored. Episode 1 of The Outlaws starts in a mall shop. Ronnie is shopping with her mother. She sees a dress that she wants to buy, but her mother tells her off. As Ronnie exits the shop, security personnel stop her for shoplifting. Her attempts to escape are unsuccessful. Ronnie is then taken to the Avon Valley Probation Center, where she meets the other 5 of the group. Frank Sheldon, the shifty old-timer, John Halloran, a right-wing blowhard, and a businessman, Myrna Okeke, the left-wing militant, Gregory Dillard, a disproportionately tall simpleton, and Christian Taylor. During the middle of their first day, another member joins them. She arrives in style in a car chased by paparazzi and wearing expensive designer clothes. She is Lady Gabriella Penrose Howe, the celebutante of the group. The 7 now work their first day under the supervision of Brenda. The group socializes, and Brenda pulls Ronnie aside to make a pact, snitch on the group, and get the recommendation letter to stay in college. Gabriella smokes a puff, which results in a tussle between John and Christian. Gabriella makes a video of them fighting as Brenda intervenes. After work finishes, the focus shifts to each of their personal lives beyond the community service. Frank isn't close to his daughter, whom he abandoned during her childhood and neglected through adulthood. His time with her is limited to the service getting over. Ronnie is an Oxford student on a full scholarship, whose hard-working parents are not happy with her situation. Christian is revealed to be a former gang member, trying his best to keep his younger sister safe from his former gangmates. John is a family man behind the tough exterior. He has an important business meeting with Chinese investors, whose investments will be able to get his family's enterprise out of the woods. They're impressed with his presentation and agree to sign the deal, conditional on a fiduciary understanding. The next day, Christian is bothered by his former mates at work. They force him into retrieving a phone line for them in exchange for leaving his sister out of the mess. They hand him a gun, which Ronnie notices. After the work is complete, Brenda stops them from leaving as a heat gun is missing. During the checks, Brenda does not find either of the guns. Ronnie took the gun from Christian's bag, and after a tense scene, Ronnie's brevity is able to pull her out of trouble at the security check. The same day, John reaches the office in a hurry to sign the papers. But, to his surprise, the Chinese group shows him the video of him fighting with Christian that Gabriella uploaded. The deal stands cancelled, leaving him in a precarious situation. Christian arrives at Lawrence Hill to steal the phone. Unknown to him, Ronnie arrives just in time to save him, but the thugs take a picture of her van. The episode ends with Christian dumping the stash in the community center, John returning home a dejected man and ruminating about what he will do next to save his family, Frank possibly reconnecting with his family, helping with his borrowed heat gun, and Ronnie, ecstatic after a wild night's adventure. The first episode is all about first impressions and setting the pace. The characters are a diverse bunch and will make for an interesting watch as a unit going ahead. The writing is an endearing mix of funny and the grim realities of all the members of the group. Sincere efforts are also made to make the storyline dynamic in nature and introduce a compelling subplot in the first episode itself. The Ronnie-Christian partnership looks like it's going to be a thrilling development for the series. The Outlaws starts on a promising note by making the choice to make the show about the characters as much as its central setting. We get to take a peek into the lives of all the members, which is something that provides much-needed diversity to the plot. Britain is all about a potpourri of people from different nationalities, and the show represents just that. The police taking a whiff of Christian's robbery will further add tension to the narrative in the coming episodes. It will loom like a hanging knife over Ronnie and Christian's heads. Overall, the first episode of The Outlaws was a big hit. It strikes the right chords and hardly gets anything wrong. Excited for the episodes ahead? Episode 2 of The Outlaws starts with the backstory of Gabriella and Greg. In a flashback, it is shown that the former caught the police's attention by vandalizing her girlfriend's car after a breakup. The latter got into trouble as he rammed his car into a police car while in a session with a prostitute. The focus mostly shifts from the community center and into the lives of the seven. Frank's grandson, Tom, wants to ask out a girl at school. His tepidness is compensated by Frank's confidence, who asks him to tell his friends that Lady Gabriella will be at the party. While at lunch at the center, the group discusses each other's secrets. Myrna, Frank, and John accidentally stumble upon Christian's stash from the other night. The three decide to meet at the party and dispense with the bag. Meanwhile, Ronnie gets excited by the prospect of spending a night with Christian and his sister, S. She agrees to help S study for tests in order to get into a good college. But Christian decides to leave the two alone. S and Ronnie then play a game of answering and asking questions to know each other better. Their conversation reveals Ronnie's feelings toward Christian. The action shifts to the party. The guests start arriving, but there is no sign of Gabriella yet. The lady has her own night of suffering going on. Earlier in the day, her girlfriend agrees to meet her to discuss their relationship. Gabriella has an outburst and her friend leaves, accusing her of never being able to change. She frequents bars and junk food places, only to think about her own attitude and the lack of control she has over her anger. Gabriella stalks her girlfriend outside her house and is angry when she sees her with another woman. In this state, she continuously rams into a stranger's car while at a drive-thru and gets locked up again. With no one to call, she remembers the car Greg gave her at lunch at the center. Greg reaches the station and, using his smarts, outwits a paparazzi waiting for Gabriella outside the prison. The two share a beautiful moment in the car wherein they bond over their mutual feelings about how miserable their lives are. At Tom's house, his friends start getting anxious as the star of the party for whom they came didn't arrive yet. They start accusing Tom of lying to them in order to get people over at his house. The bell rings, but it is Myrna and John, whom Frank receives and takes upstairs. The three decide not to hand over the money to the corrupt police and keep it for themselves, leaving the bag with Frank, as he can't leave town due to his anklet. As Tom's friends are about to leave, in walks Gabriella with Greg behind her with pizzas in his hands to save the day. Ronnie too gets back to her house, still gushing over Christian's compliments on her necklace. Suddenly, she is attacked by the thugs from Lawrence Hill, who confirmed her address via the photos they took of the van. She avoids the situation by thinking on her feet, and the thugs leave. The episode ends with Greg once again gaining favor with his employers by signing up Lady Gabriella as a client, and the thug's boss alerting Christian's former gangmates of the suspected betrayal. The second episode of The Outlaws furthers the idea that the show will not just be confined to the community center. In fact, the focus seems to have shifted entirely towards the Lawrence Hills robbery, and the story of the other characters is relegated to subplots. This seems like a sensible choice given how well the setup has been until now. With the introduction of a menacing villain in the form of a criminal gang boss, things look like getting really nasty here for our seven musketeers. The depth in Merchant's writing was a bit inconsistent. Certain scenes involving his character and Gabriella and the parallel between their condition were brilliant. The arc for both the actors reaffirmed the notion of more than that meets the eye so popular in this genre. But the same attention is not given to John's follow-up of his failure with the Chinese investors with his father. The first episode ended on an ominous note for John and his family about losing the investment, but there is no follow-up to that in the second episode. This seemed a bit odd to me, but hopefully, we will get to see more of it in the third episode. Episode 2 is a bit of a dampener compared to the first episode, but does a decent job of continuing the interesting timeline of the Seven Outlaws. Episode 3 of The Outlaws starts with another flashback, this time focusing on Myrna and John. One goes to prison for hijacking a police recruitment vehicle by towing it with her truck. John, while watching news coverage of the incident, is told by his wife that she heard someone in the house. He rushes downstairs and is able to apprehend one of the perpetrators, beating him before his wife stops him. A small interaction between Frank, Myrna, and John also reveals that Frank has been outvoted by the two to take the money to the police. The group plays a fun game of naming a porn star name for themselves, the name of their first pet, and the street they grew up on. Ronnie narrates her horrific ordeal with the masked man to Christian, who reassures her that they won't return. John gets a notice from the burglar for a legal case for loss in future earnings and racial profiling. Myrna's demonstration of protest against hate crimes outside the city hall becomes the center of attraction for the group, with Myrna's background probed a little. Her group, Bristol Collective Justice, ousted her after her little stunt with the recruitment vehicle. Myrna really has BCJ as her family and friends, choosing not to raise a family due to her vehement commitment to the cause of racial justice. Christian's former mates know of his betrayal and are after him to retrieve the money. Gabriella and Greg are busy organizing the former's Dream Music Festival. Since the deadline is the next day, Greg hurries to complete the paperwork. Gabriella promises to help Greg realize some of his innocent dreams, like flying in a private plane and dating a supermodel. The Chinese deal not going through is slowly realized in Josh's company's fractured financials. Without timely intervention, it runs the risk of going under. Ronnie and Christian spend some time together, but not before the latter's gangmates catch up with them. A short chase sequence sees them just avoid them and accidentally land on Gabriella's party cruise. The scene shifts to the Hallorans, where the father-son duo has a verbal tussle regarding who is in charge of the company. John's alternative to the Chinese investment is instantly rejected by his father, sounding ominous signs for him. Myrna joins up with her sister, to her surprise. They, along with her friends, go for a gentle stroll in the park, but frown upon Myrna's radical views. At the cruise party, Gabriella asks Greg to pick up the stash for her. Ronnie and Christian are on the precipice of developing mutual feelings for each other. John makes a U-turn on the decision to hand over the money to the police, as he is scared for his enterprise. The episode ends with a heady montage involving all the characters sans Frank. Gabriella feels bad about her casual attitude and returns to Greg apologetically and in full seriousness to complete the filings. Ronnie is still gushing over her day with Christian, who picks up his sister and walks back home to find it broken into and vandalized. For the time being, he convinces his gang mates that he didn't steal the money. Ronnie is paid a visit by the police, but her parents save the day by lying for her. Myrna makes it back to BCJ when she offers the money to keep it going. The climax crescendos with Frank, Myrna, and John agreeing to keep the money. The Outlaws is turning into a nervy, thriller-toned series with every episode. The storytelling elements now have a consistent tone, with each character's life being explored as representative of a different subset of the British political and social ecosystem. All of this convalesces with a shared timeline of events that places the characters in each other's vicinity. Episode 3 has a good balance of story building and exposition about the country's fractured legal system. Many social tropes that have been popular in the television space find a place here. Writer Stephen Merchant also does a better job of creating an underdog identity for the group that is as relatable as it is an exciting opportunity to explore the many facets of diverse human personalities. The drug line stolen money plotline seems like just beginning to take off. Definitely expect more of this in the coming episodes. Episode 3 was also pivotal in further warming up the group to the audience by showing their vulnerable and caring sides. At times, it seemed a bit too convenient for the creators to leave events unfinished for the sake of avoiding complexity, but overall, this episode is one of the most compelling of the series. Episode 4 of The Outlaws starts off with a different kind of flashback. This time, we take a peek into the loving and adorable relationship between Frank and his daughter. They dance in the middle of an electronic goods shop and pick up a record player without paying for it. In the present, we see Esme nervous before her big test. She talks to Ronnie over the phone, who calms her down. Ronnie's phone privileges are taken away after the incidents of the previous episode. Esme is still probed by Malaki to join the gang and work full-time for him. Diane, the group's supervisor, is visited by police sergeants investigating Lawrence Hill. Tom's mother inadvertently comes to know of the party at the house after a friend of hers mentions Lady Gaby. Christian breaks into the center to retrieve the bag, but does not find it. His day gets worse when Diane shows up with the police force to check the premises. In a tense sequence, he just about manages to avoid the attentions of Diane and the sergeant and exits the center. An anxious Esme is overwhelmed by the pressure. She flunks her test and goes to Malachi's house to join his gang. The two talk about the nature of the latter's organized syndicate, and he hands Esme a gun for protection. Frank, Myrna, and John blackmail Greg into laundering the money through a shell company, citing his confessions as to forging checks to get him to it. Ronnie's parents threaten to displace her from the house and stop going to college. She finally gives in and decides to tell them the truth. Frank takes his share out of the money and gives the bag to Greg, who takes it to his office. He forges the signature of the compliance officer to complete the transaction. Ronnie's parents are endeared by her honesty and decide to let her stay with the caveat that she will not have further dealings with Christian. John's father learns of the Chinese debacle and John has no option but to lie to him about a fictitious new investor. Esme and Christian's relationship further sours as the former squarely turns against him and joins forces with Malachi. To prove her worth and dedication, she promises him to return his money in exchange for an apartment. Frank's mind goes back to the night he left his family for good when he sees a vintage record player in a shop. He left for Portugal and never came back. Christian vows to find the person from the group who stole the money. His sidebar with Ronnie goes unanswered as she avoids him on her parents' heed. Meanwhile, Greg and Gaby are busy coming up with a name for the music festival. Gaby gets anxious about meeting her father and reveals that she is yet to take his approval for the festival. Esme, in a moment of brain freeze, takes a gun and shoots one of Malachi's men as she sees him order to hurt Christian. Greg is seen distributing the checks to the other three by Christian when he is interrupted by a crying Esme. He sends her to a safe spot and interrogates John about the money. Ronnie sees him threatening John with the gun and Diane, through sheer luck, stumbles upon it in the toilet. She interrogates the group about the gun and Ronnie, who now is overwhelmed with guilt about her behavior and promise made to her parents, tells the truth. Christian escapes the scene. The final montage of the episode sees Ronnie contemplate her decision. Margaret sees the record player and shares a hearty moment with Frank. Tom discovers that Frank is once again planning to abandon the family when he sees a one-way ticket to Rio de Janeiro booked in Frank's name. What an episode! It had everything going for it. Right from the start of the flashback, the tone was set right. A number of important events are brought in a significantly fashionable manner. A complete turnaround for Esme's character was imminent, and this episode does full justice to it. There were also some bold decisions that the writers took for the characters. The heartbreak in the form of the one-way ticket was the most painful, but Ronnie's changed priorities also made for sad viewing. Episode 4 was one of the darkest of the series until now. This did not take away from the jokes, although the quality suffered from the previous ones. The subplots have come to a tipping point. The show can only go one way from here, and that is up. The stakes right now in The Outlaws are the highest and are so volatile they can blow up at any time. The episode also marked the entry of the most prominent villain from London, who was on the sidelines until now. His appearance has raised expectations for the upcoming 2 episodes. A weird flashback begins episode 5 of The Outlaws. Diane, the supervisor, was actually a part of the community payback sentence. Her senior now was her supervisor back then. The focus shifts to the present, where the police trace Malachi through Spider, who was brought in after the shooting. Ronnie finally gets her phone back and listens to Esme's voicemail. Her attempts to connect with the brother-sister duo are to no avail, though. Greg is finally being considered for a partner after his success with Lady Gaby. Spencer, his arch-nemesis, spies on him to find a fault. Meanwhile, a parallel sequence sees 2 characters and their respective fathers engage in an important business meeting with significant financial consideration. Lady Gaby presents to her father, the Earl, an idea for the music festival titled Private, while John takes Frank with the name Howard Cherry to explain his sudden investment to his father. Both sequences run side by side and end positively for John, just about managing, and negatively for Gaby, whose father agrees in front of her to fund the festival, asks Greg to sabotage the plan. Christian and Esme make it back home to finally run away. The two share a tender moment and wonder what lies ahead for them. Reno, still reeling from snitching on Christian, is threatened by Diane about the gun incident. Greg, now at a crossroads with the festival, attempts to honor his word to Lady Gaby's father. In the process, he upsets her so much that a rant takes all of the group in its wrath. Ronnie adamantly brings up the necessity to find Christian and help him with the money. The group ignores her pleadings, with the exception of Myrna. She visits her sister to ask for advice on the issue. Help Christian and thereby losing the chance to help the thousands who will benefit from the money received from the loot. Another Diane flashback shows how she was asked to make a choice between her current life and the one she wanted by her supervisor. Gaby is still upset with Greg's comments about his father. In an act of rage, she stops her party midway and decides to ruin the bungalow's lawns, the exact reason why her father said no to the festival. She ends up in jail again and calls Greg, who comforts her. They decide to help Ronnie find Christian and are supported by Myrna and Frank. John, however, snitches on them, and the plan is on hold for the time being. His father discovers Howard Cherry's truth when he visits the center and spots Frank. The group continues with their plan of breaking into Diane's office. Meanwhile, Spencer gets a whiff of Greg's possible wrongdoing and fraud of the firm and looks into his stash of files, possibly finding something incriminating. The plan is successfully executed with some last-minute improvisations. The sergeant visits Diane about her observations regarding Christian. To everyone's surprise, when he opens his file, it is actually Malachi's photo on it, not Christian. The cliffhanger that the episode ended on is just one of the things that makes the wait for the season finale a nightmare. So many different subplots crescendoed ominously for our group. Spencer discovers the fake files, John's father discovers his lie about Howard Cherry's identity, Tom discovers Frank's plan to abandon the family. The list is a good one. Episode 5 functioned on weighty themes of abandonment and good parenting among others. The mutuality of the characters' conditions is craftily brought out in the writing and how they are developed. The parallels drawn are heartbreaking in the end, but also worthy of praise. Other important elements of the storytelling in the episode include the need for a stronger human connection, i.e., empathy, and the strength of togetherness. Other key ideas that were explored in this episode were the threshold to live with yourself on the basis of your actions and the uncertainty of choices we make. Both combined to form the core of the reason why they decided to help Ronnie get the information about Christian. They also experienced that in their own lives and made the decision to be content with their mistakes. The web of lies spread in the first 4 episodes of The Outlaws seems to be finally catching up. The season finale promises to be something truly extraordinary. If done well, it will end season 1 on a high note. Episode 6, the final flashback is for the central cog in The Outlaws Season 1 plot, Christian. We see him as a bodyguard in a nightclub. He removes Spider from the premises for distributing drugs. Christian is later seen being beaten up by Malachi's gang. They offer him a job with the gang, and he is forced into taking it. In the present, the opening montage is made up of individual interviews with each member of the group. The sergeants investigate the identity of the real Christian Taylor, aka Malachi. Diane takes an active interest in solving the mystery, even though there are no takers for her enthusiasm. The group plans to meet at the placement to forge a plan to find Christian, while Diane takes the minibus against Mr. Wilde's instructions to look for Christian. Sergeant Hayes interrogates Malachi and warns him of further action for his association with the Brook Hill gang. Each of the characters returns to their personal lives to confront their lies. Frank's daughter finally forgives him for abandoning his family, not knowing the truth. Greg's horrors come to life when he learns Spencer knows about Howard Cherry. John's father lambasts him for taking dirty money at the first sign of trouble. Ronnie shares an emotional moment with her mother, who tells Ronnie of her own adventures as a youth. She reminds Ronnie of her obligation to the family. Ronnie is placed under house arrest, but calls for help. Myrna ensures she is able to sneak out and resume their search for Christian. The sergeants finally make the connection between the masked man, Christian, and the van on the night at Lawrence Hill. Christian's flashback shows how the desperation for money pushed him to join the BH gang. Malachi humiliates him, but Christian bears it for the sake of his sister. The group goes to Malachi to inquire about Christian's whereabouts. There, they learn his real name, Ben. They split up to look for him, but are unaware that one of his men is following them. They figure out the place where Ben grew up, Lamb's Bottom Street, and proceed to go there. Ben continues his investigation into the Lawrence Hill incident. He learns of the dean and his association with the BH gang. The police show up at Ronnie's house, but do not find her there. Argesi uses the Find a Friend feature to locate Ronnie's whereabouts. Meanwhile, the group successfully locates Ben's safe house, Cumberland Basin. They reach the spot where Ben and Esma are hiding. After a long conversation and Myrna revealing the mysterious tombstone of the police officer, Christian decides to listen to them. Worried about his own firm, John phones Diane. She reaches the spot in her minibus, and so does Malachi and his gang. Ronnie and Ben go the other way, and the rest of the group manages to escape on the bus. The biggest confrontation happens at the center itself, where the BH gang corner the group. But, to everyone's surprise, the Outlaws stand firm to protect Ben. The police arrive shortly, thanks to Frank's anklet turning red, and Ben is taken into custody. Another montage of interviews follows. The group's dynamics are completely changed after the events of the day. They stand together, united in their quest to help Ben, and prove his innocence by not speaking the truth. The police have no option but to leave Ben due to lack of evidence and testimonies. Instead, the group gets a further sanction of 100 hours of community payback. This time, they take it with immense happiness. The Outlaws concludes with the last episode in the first season, and I must say, this was underwhelming. Despite running almost an hour long, it always seemed that Merchant just didn't have enough time to touch every subplot point. What happens to Greg and Spencer's threats? A complete ignorance of that thread was really disappointing, and so was the finale where they all stand up to the BH gang. The dean, about whose expected entry I talked some episodes ago, never came around. His threat melted like ice cream in hot sun. The wrapping up, so to speak, did not do justice to the great work done in the previous episodes. The momentum from episode 4 just vanished completely. Merchant and the writing team went for a more moral approach and chose to unnecessarily, in my opinion, pander around the streets of Lamb's Bottom to no great impact on the storyline. As the season finale, not a lot was left for season 2 either. Merchant and co somehow felt that it was enough to show the group together as a victorious triumph, not caring to give proper closure with respect to the characters. Maybe it will pick up in the next season, which has already been commissioned. But one thing is for sure, this finale confirms the trend in writing inconsistency. That was a big mood dampener through the series.